Good evening, and welcome to this time of worship. Hear these words from Philippians chapter 2. Precisely because he was in very nature God, Jesus did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. Rather, he made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even death on a cross. Let's pray. Gracious God, we hear these words about your Son, and we remember the faithfulness of his life, his willingness to go all the way to death. We thank you for the way that you have provided through him. And as we look back to a time very near that death this evening, we pray, God, that you would open our hearts and minds to understand a little better what it was like, what it cost, and what it brought about. Be with us now as we worship, as we consider, as we reflect, as we express our thanks. We pray your blessing on this time together through Christ. Amen. Please find one of those red hymnals. We'll sing the verses 1, 2, and 3 of number 335 together. In a matter of hours, Jesus would lay down his life for his friends. Before that, though, he asked them to celebrate Passover with him. Passover was a holiday with its roots in Egypt. God had sent Moses to rescue the children of Israel from centuries of slavery, and that release took place one night as an angel swept through the land, bringing destruction to those who ignored God and passing over those who had sacrificed a lamb and painted their doors with its blood, those who were trusting the Lord. The Passover that Jesus celebrated was part of a long tradition, remembering God's faithfulness and power in setting slaves free. That tradition unfolded in a predictable way every year as people rehearsed this familiar story. But this night, Jesus has another sacrifice and a different rescue in mind. So he asks a couple of disciples to go into Jerusalem and find a place where they can have this meal together. When all was ready, the rest followed, filling a room on the upper level of a home in the city. Jesus had begun their time together by washing the disciples' feet. This simple act set the stage, showing these people their Lord's commitment to service. And then they settled into their places around the table, and Jesus put another twist into the evening's celebration.
I earnestly desire to meet this Passover with you before I suffer.
This was supposed to be a happy time, when people look back on their deliverance from Egypt, praising God for his intervention. But Jesus had struck a different tone, and then he went on.
Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me. One who is eating with me.
Ever since he called me, I've been bringing people to meet Jesus, like my brother Peter, to Gentiles who wanted to speak with him. And now Jesus is saying that one of us, one of those he called, will betray him? It's too much to accept. Who would do such a thing? Could it be me? Oh dear God, is it I?
Is it possible that Jesus is looking into my heart and seeing something still lost there? Me, Bartholomew, raised in a town where Jesus performed his first miracle. Oh dear God, when Philip first told me of this man from Nazareth, I scoffed. Is there still a question about the master in my heart? Is it I? Is it I?
James, the son of Alphaeus, a common name for a common man. Yet Jesus called out to me. I have watched him heal. I helped him pass food that he created for thousands of people out of thin air. But at times, I have also wondered if he is all that they say. His prediction. Is he reading my mind and finding doubt? Is it I? Is it I?
A traitor is among us. I, Simon the Zealot, know of such behavior. I have seen so many betray our law and our ways. I feel the old fervor rising in me. I can almost feel a sword in my hand once more. But I also know that Jesus is a man of peace. He would not solve this problem with violence, even though that was the way chosen by my former compatriots. Instead, he would ask us to turn the other cheek. But is that possible if we are in the company of a turncoat? Surely the rules are different for such a case. Surely I can't be expected to love a person like this. I am torn. The desire for a sword to do away with this threat pushes hard against my Lord's command to love an enemy. And when I feel that push and pull, I wonder, have I already betrayed him in my heart with my desire to strike out? Is it I? Is it I?
I, Matthew, I'm the obvious choice. Haven't I already turned my back on my nation by serving Rome as a tax collector? Others in the room must be thinking, I am the one Jesus has in mind. But I've changed. I've been a faithful follower, usually. On occasion, I've had questions. On some days when the meals were scarce, when the ground we stepped on was hard, I missed the comforts of my old life. But even a tax collector can change, can't he? My God, is it I? Is it I?
We gathered here tonight for a Passover meal, and I listened closely as Jesus told that familiar story. It took me back to the days of my youth, and I could almost hear my own father saying, "Thaddeus, listen. Thaddeus, listen. Listen to this wondrous story of Moses leading the children out of Egypt." It was a great triumph, he would say, a great triumph. But he also told me that not long afterwards, those very same people began to grumble against Moses. And then they turned their back on Jesus. Did Jesus have that in mind earlier when he spoke about a traitor among us? Could one of us, one of his chosen 12, who have heard and seen so much over these last 3 years, could one of us actually betray him? Well, those ancient Hebrews, they turned away from God, and he had rescued them. It's not that far-fetched of an idea. Any one of us could also fall away. Even me. Oh Lord, is it I? Is it I?
Back in Bethsaida, I knew Peter and Andrew. It wasn't a very big town. And now all three of us are among Jesus' closest friends. I still can't get over how he found me and invited me. Then I went and found Nathanael and told him about Jesus. Since then, I've told others too. Tonight, though it seems like everything is coming apart, one of us will turn against our friend. Who could it be? Could it be me? Philip? Is it I? Is it I?
Thomas, the twin. When Jesus called me, I left my home, my family. I left people closest to me. I gave up everything. That's why it's so important to me to be sure. Some of us in this room seem to accept what comes without question, but I want to be sure. Are my doubts bigger than I realized? Could they lead me to do something rash? Might I be the one who turns on him? Is it I? Is it I?
John and I were among the first that Jesus called. Brothers who had a good business in fishing, let that go in favor of something even better. And after 3 years, I had no regrets. Now I hear Jesus talking about a traitor, and I'm surprised. Would people who gave up so much turn on him? Doesn't make any sense. Could someone sell out Jesus? Could I? Is it I?
I can see the wheels turning in James' head. My older brother, the business guy, calculating for me, John. I'm nearly in tears. Jesus believes he's about to be betrayed. Jesus, the one who has shown us so well what it means to love, sees in this room one for whom is love no interest. I can hardly bear it, but I also know the darkness in my own heart and how fickle I can be. So his words cut me to the bone. Is it I? Is it I?
He knows. This silver in my pocket weighs more now than when I came in. Or maybe I'm just feeling the total of all I've managed to skim from the common purse. Did someone see me? Did they tell Jesus? Why not come right out and point a finger? Why all the mystery? Does he think I'll change my mind? If so, he doesn't realize how determined I can be. Peter asked Jesus not to come to Jerusalem. The rest of us let him know we weren't wild about this strategy either. We need a Messiah who will free us, not a backcountry rabbi content to take his time. Let's get this show on the road. Or, as Peter might say, Jesus needs to fish or cut bait. He knows. And I don't care. But it's not quite time. So I better look as stricken as everyone else. What are they thinking to themselves? Oh, right. Is it I?
The Rock. That's what he calls me, Peter the Rock. I was happy on the water. I could have made a living fishing there for the rest of my life. But then Jesus came along and looked straight into my soul. Now I wouldn't be anywhere else. We've had our moments, Jesus and me, because I am a straight shooter. I call them like I see them. And Jesus has put me in my place. That hasn't been easy for me, but when I think about it, I'm grateful that he did. And now Jesus said he's about to be betrayed. If I can get my hands on that, I don't know exactly what I would do. Is what he is talking about much different from what I've done to him more than once? Is that what he's getting at? Is Jesus saying that even I could turn on him? Is it I?
During the meal, Jesus was expected to explain the items on the table in ways that would have been very familiar. So he takes the bread and gives thanks for it. After that, the cup, and offers a blessing as well. But then he gives his description of each, using ideas that would have caught those disciples by surprise.
This is my body, broken for you. Take and eat. This is my blood of the covenant, poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Drink from it, all of you.
The disciples would not soon forget this meal with Jesus. In fact, they would very quickly encourage others to remember Jesus by weaving a portion of this supper into their regular worship experience through what we now call communion, a practice that has been part of church life ever since that night in Jerusalem long ago. Remember me, Jesus asks, knowing that we might not. And so he links memory with an action. Communion requires us to do something, to take, to eat. It's an event that also has a sensory component, which further aids memory. You know how a smell or a sound can trigger a memory, how certain foods take you back. It's the same thing here. We feel, we taste, we smell, and we remember. We remember that night when disciples gathered with their Lord for a meal that was supposed to be one thing only to turn into something else. We imagine the disciples wrestling with their thoughts as they hear him speak of betrayal. We wonder what might have gone through our minds had we been there. We hear Jesus speaking of his body that's about to be broken, his blood about to be poured out. We know that he is about to die. We also know that he wants his followers, his friends, to understand that and to remember why. And so we come to this table to eat and drink, and also to consider Jesus' faithfulness in following a path that led to death, such that those deserving death might live. And as we prepare to follow the disciples in the communion, let me encourage you now to take a quiet moment to reflect on what Jesus said and what he would do. Sometime before this evening meal, Jesus had taught his disciples a prayer that would take them through life in God's way. A prayer that acknowledges God's holiness, that promises our faithfulness, that asks God's provision and forgiveness, that looks to God for guidance and care. A prayer that recognizes God over all. As we offer that prayer again this evening, may it draw us into the presence of the one who gave himself for us. And then, as we eat and drink, may it be with renewed commitment to live with and for our King, the one who, we remember, gave himself for us. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. In a moment, we'll be offering the bread and cup of communion to any who would like to participate. And the way we'll serve it is by coming down to the front, and we'll dismiss by each pew, where you can take a piece of bread, dip it into the cup, and then eat right there. This is called intincture. It's one of the ways that communion is celebrated in the Christian church. And as we do this, as we hold this bread, as we feel this drink, as it enters our bodies, may we be mindful again of what the Lord did, of what the Lord wants, what we are saying as we eat and drink. Let's pray. Loving and gracious God, praise be to your holy name, for your goodness and for your grace, made evident to us these simple things. We thank you for Jesus, who gave himself all the way to death, that we might live. And we pray now that as we take this bread and drink from this cup, that we would be mindful of his sacrifice, of his love, of the redemption that comes from this, of the connection that we have because of it. Praise be to your holy name. Amen.
Yeah.